Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, and today we're going to be going through a hand that I played recently at Borgata. I ended up taking 35th place in the Borgata Main Event. I've had some pretty rough runs at Borgata in that I've made a very deep run, I think 3 times that I can remember off the top of my head. I think I took something like 12th place, 20th place, and 35th place, often losing just a big flip. And you may say, why do you keep getting it in with flips? You don't know it's a flip. And also, hands like ace-king and pocket queens are great. Don't fold them. Anyway, I've been a flip or two away from making a very deep run at Borgata, but this time we had to settle for 35th place for $15,000. So let's take a look at some of the fun hands from that tournament. Here we do have the pocket queens early in the day, playing 200 big blinds deep. I am definitely going to raise the queens every time to about 600. You could make it bigger if you thought you were going to get called more often. When we're playing very deep stacked, like 200 big blinds or more, I'm usually going to be pretty inclined to raise to about 3 big blinds at the minimum. I guess there's some rare world where your opponents will fold everything to a 3 big blind raise, in which case you don't really care if you get action. So maybe you want to raise a little bit smaller when you have the nut hands, but that's very abnormal. So I'm going to be making it about 3 big blinds in this scenario because I want to build the pot. So then, a loose passive player 3-bets. Now, in a loose passive player 3-bets, what does that mean? Well, usually when a loose passive player 3-bets, it kind of implies they have a really good hand. Yes, they are loose. Yes, they're playing lots of hands. But when they do play a hand, it's usually a very, very strong hand that when they're playing it aggressively, right? So I'm already not loving this. I think a lot of people get confused when they see a loose player re-raising, thinking, all right, this player's loose, so I can call with anything, without forgetting that they're usually passive, meaning when they do apply aggression, they have a really good hand most of the time. All right, now, the kid on the button cold calls seems to be a relatively reasonable kid. He probably doesn't have aces or kings too often, so he probably has something like ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, maybe suited connectors, maybe small pairs, something like that. But in general, this is a scenario where I'm in pretty good shape against the kid. But I'm actually very concerned about the loose passive player's 3-bet. So anyway, with queens in this scenario, I think we have really only 2 good options. We can either call or re-raise rather large. The fact that we have this 2100 cold call makes me a little bit more inclined to re-raise than I normally would. You may say, why don't you just want to get it all in with queens? Well, queens are good, but if 200 big blind goes in the pot against a loose passive player, queens are probably not in that great a shape. So you have to be a little bit cautious when it comes to getting all of your money in. So we're going to call and try to flop well. Flop comes Jack 9-2. Loose passive player bets 4,500. And now if the kid called or raised, I would just fold, presuming that the kid mostly had a whole lot of jacks and 9s in their range. Maybe they could have 10s. Maybe they could have like ace-jack suited or something. But I think in general, you're going to find that this is going to be a whole lot of sets if this player calls the 4,500 bet. Especially given that he has to worry about me still to act, who could also easily have pocket jacks or pocket 9s, right? He does fold, though. And now it's on me. This is a spot where I think a lot of players get themselves in a ton of trouble. They raise, thinking, all right, I have an overpair. I want to find out where I stand. But realize if I raise to 11,000 or so, and my opponent goes all in, I have to fold, but I'd rather not fold decently strong overpairs, because for all I know, my opponent's just going to blast it with a hand like ace-king of spades. Obviously, I don't think that's going to happen all that often, but it might, and I'm not really trying to fold. So you're going to find that in general, when you're not happy getting all your money in, and you have a pretty good made hand, look, queens is pretty good. We only realistically lose to aces, kings, and jacks, right? Yes, maybe 9s too. Maybe Jack 9 suited, depending on how aggressive our opponent is. Maybe I've just drastically underestimated him, right? This is a spot where I'm going to be pretty inclined to just call and see what develops. And I actually think if my opponent keeps betting on most turns, I'm probably supposed to fold. And I know that sounds a little bit tight, but you have to be very cautious multi-way. And this is a pretty great example of that. Turn is queen of diamonds. Okay, well, now I'm not going to fold. And the opponent checks, which is kind of a bummer. Because if you had aces or kings or jacks or 9s, you would think you would bet a lot of the time, right? So given he checked, what should we do? Well, I definitely think we need to go for a relatively small bet. I do think some players will check aces or kings here because they realize correctly I could easily have jacks, 9s, or queens, right? So this is a spot where perhaps the opponent elects to play a little bit cautiously with those hands. So really we want to ask here, how much can I get my opponent to call with a marginal hand? Like maybe he has ace-jack, maybe he has ace-9, maybe he has, well, aces or kings, right? How much will those hands call? And how much do I need to bet to be able to realistically jam the river? So in this scenario, if I bet something like 6,000, the pot's going to go up to 27,000, right, if my opponent calls, which will allow me to make an all-in jam on the river. So I think we need to bet just a little bit more than 6,000, maybe 7,000, something like that. That's going to set up a solid river jam scenario, and a lot of people won't be able to fold aces or kings in this spot. And for all I know, maybe the opponent decides to hero call something like ace-jack. So I like a bet of 6,500. I don't think we want to go very big, like 13,000 or all-in, because then it kind of forces our opponent to just have a very good hand to call. And I want to do everything I can to let my opponent stick around with the marginal stuff that's drawing thin. The priority here is not to take him fold ace-jack. If he has his 5 outs, well, he's welcome to draw to 5 outs as long as I'm putting some money in the pot. Definitely don't check here, by the way. Don't slow play. Even if you can kind of tell your opponent's done with this hand, you still shouldn't really slow play because, like, what hand should be done with it here? Like ace-x offsuit? I mean, I guess those are drawing dead, but if he has ace-king, he has some outs. If he has a 10, he has some outs. So usually the opponent's not going to be completely dead in this scenario. Anyway, I bet 6,500. The opponent does call. River is now a 10, which is the worst card in the deck. Because now any king gets there, right? If our opponent had king, queen, king, jack, pocket kings, ace, king, all those got there. And if our opponent had aces, he may not pay if we bet. However, one nice thing about this scenario is if our opponent has a lower set, jacks, 10s, 9s, which all are perfectly reasonable for our opponent to have, although he'd probably bet jacks and 9s on the turn. If he does have one of those hands, he's going to be somewhat inclined to call a small river bet. So in this scenario, I think we have two options. We can either just check, or we can bet small, like 7,000, with the idea that we're going to fold if we get jammed on. Obviously, that opens us up to getting jammed on sometimes, which is not where we want to be, because for all I know, maybe my opponent takes a hand like aces and turns it into a bluff. I don't think it's going to happen all that often, but maybe the opponent does that. Maybe the opponent has something like jack 10 and decides to bluff it. Who knows? It's important to realize you don't know what the opponent is doing. You can make logical assumptions and you can guess, but you never really know. So, especially when there's a lot of money at risk, I typically take the cautious route, and that's usually going to result in me checking. I remember playing this hand. I could look at my opponent. I thought the opponent was kind of annoyed at the river. I thought he was kind of over it to some extent, meaning he's probably going to fold to a bet, or maybe he has something like two pair or set that's annoyed / done with it. But I didn't know. So in this scenario, I decided to recognize I don't know everything about my opponents. Maybe there's a little bit of value to be had here, but I just checked behind. And the opponent had pocket kings, so good thing I didn't go for value, right? Would have lost a big chunk of chips. Also, early in tournaments, it's important to realize that, well, in general in tournaments, the chips you lose are worth more than the chips you can potentially win. And especially when you're going for big, thin value bets, well, you don't need to be making big, thin value bets is what it amounts to, unless you know your opponent's a bit of a calling station, which I certainly did not know about this opponent, because we haven't really been playing all that long together. Besides, I have seen them play a decent amount of hands, but not be very aggressive pre-flop. Notice if I just 3-bet this hand, or, well, what would it be? Yeah, 4-bet this hand pre-flop, that would not have worked out, right? So even though we lost this hand, I think we played it about as well as we realistically could, and we only lost a little bit, which is good. You want to make sure whenever you lose little bits of money with your normally strong hands, especially in spots where a lot of your opponents just lose a lot of chips. So I'm happy with this hand. That's going to be it for today. Hope you enjoyed this video for Poker News. If you have not been to Poker News recently, go check it out. They have lots of news, as their name implies. They also have a lot of strategy and educational material to help you become a better player. So check it out at pokernews.com. If you enjoy it, let them know. And if you don't, well, go do something else. Make sure you enjoy your time, because at the end of the day, I just want all of you to be happy. All right, have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. And I'll talk to you next week.